Welcome to the Slow Ready Podcast, a casual drive into the music and culture of Goose. I'm Mike.
And I'm Alex.
And we are back with another exciting episode where we are going to recap the recent amazing 3-night run in Milwaukee. And as always, the best way to keep up with us is to follow us on our socials at Slow Ready Pod on everything you can imagine. And you can even email us at slowreadypod@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Love engaging with the community. And we've got tons of great topics coming up, so definitely check it out. Can't wait to get into how the 3 nights unfolded, but first we'd like to get into the news and notes from this week with Goose in our first segment, Hot Tea. So I think outside of the crazy shows this week, you would probably agree with this, Alex. Maybe the most groundbreaking news was that Jeff's taking a break or a step back from touring. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I just want to respect what Jeff's wishes are and what the band's wishes are. We've gotten a lot of messages from you all asking if we know anything or anything like that. And it just sounds like Jeff needs a mental health break, and we're going to stay out of it. I'm not going to try to pry. So I'm wishing him well. I hope that he, works on himself and gets what he needs out of this time off. And we're thinking about him and we miss him.
Well said. Love Jeff. Definitely want to support him during this time and hope he gets well soon and everything works out great, and can't wait to have him back with the boys. So,
say real quick before we move on, I got to say it's got to be something fairly serious, I would think, if you're taking a step back at such a huge point in the band's momentum right now. So I think it's important that everyone just try to stay kind and be respectful and just wish for the best for Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you care about the band and these wonderful guys, then best thing to do is just support them during this time. So here for it.
Yep.
And then kind of minor by comparison, but still quite an enormous deal when, especially if you think about a year from now, probably wouldn't have been able to imagine this happening, but Give It Time, the lead single from Goose's new album, played during the Super Bowl in a big spot in the game too. Seemed like pretty much all of the internet and Twitter and Blue Sky had seen it, and everyone wanted to chat about it. So obviously a big and gratifying moment for all of us fans, and super cool to see Goose on literally the biggest TV stage that exists.
Yeah, we got a little hunger sight at the last Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, but it was really nice to see Goose as a much bigger deal now, getting their new single out there. And I think there was only approximately 876,000 posts in excitement about this, which is awesome to see. So it's really exciting. I mean, my wife was even smacking me in the arm, like, "Oh my God, it's Give It Time!" And that's her favorite. So just terrific
Amazing.
to see.
Yeah, definitely. Huge. Yeah. I mean, when people that are out of touch and you barely know who Goose is, like in my family, are reaching out to me and be like, "Hey, I think your band was played during the Super Bowl." You know it's a big deal. So very, very cool to see.
I mean, to be fair, they got it played at the perfect time because that game was boring as hell. Like, it was over in 6 minutes. So it's good that Goose got their song in early.
Definitely, and we're probably both biased here, but the highlight of the entire Super Bowl was probably that Goose was involved, because the game was pretty much a snooze fest.
Yeah, I was asleep by like 8:30 p.m. or something like that. So I heard Goose before that.
There we go. That's a big win. So news and notes a little bit dry this week, but understandably so, because Goose is back on the road, which, as we're all the same in this regard, that's the most exciting thing in the Goose world. So me and Alex were fortunate enough to be at the first part of this winter run here. Goose was in town in Milwaukee for 3 nights in a row at the Miller High Life Theater. Absolutely incredible time. A wonderful weekend filled with so many other Goose fans, met so many cool people, and one of the best weekends of my life, hands down. I'm sure you would probably say the same, Alex.
Oh, yeah. It was absolutely incredible. And really want to shout out real quick before we get into the shows and everything. The staff at the venue was incredible. The venue was incredible. All the people, all the fans were incredible. It was just, everyone was gushing about how kind and fantastic everything was all weekend. So really want to shout you out, Goose fans, because the staff was raving about us whenever we would chat with them, asking questions to the staff. And we were all raving about the staff, and everyone in Milwaukee is just like the nicest human on earth. So it was just a really great weekend.
Yeah, terrific. And I guess before getting into the sets here, I will just say that this Miller High Life Theater, never having been there before, is one of the better venues that I've been to. I just thought it was a super classy place. The lobby was amazing. I sat in several places. It didn't seem like there was a bad view in the house. The sound was amazing, and it was small enough to feel intimate and yet big enough, obviously, to hold a pretty decent sized crowd. So nothing but praise to sing about this Miller High Life Theater.
Yeah, it was a really great venue, and Goose had played here in 2023 once prior, but to have 3 full nights and the place was pretty packed all 3 nights is pretty remarkable growth in just like a year and a half, or not even, since their last show there. So I really hope they go back, because that was one of my favorite venues I've been to, and I loved kind of that intimate feeling while it's still a relatively large venue, about 4,100 people, I believe it held. So multi-night stands there, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, if Goose is back, I will definitely be back. And I guess with no further ado, let's kind of start to break down night one here, if you'd like, Alex. It was a really, really good start to this 3 night run. I also think it may have been the coldest night in the history of America, but that's another story for another day. But we start off set one here with it was, man. It was, you could see it on everyone's faces. It was not pleasant to be outside that night. 50-mile-an-hour winds is just
Uh,
bananas.
I we weren't lucky enough to be able to go. We had to do school drop off and everything Friday morning, but it looked cold. We were looking at the forecast, and we're not jealous of you in that regard. But set list wise, let's get into that, because we were pretty jealous.
Yeah, lots to be jealous of. I definitely wish you could have been there, obviously, but they start off really, really strong right away. I'll get into this a bit more as we keep going, but definitely I feel like a theme for Goose here early in 2025 is just an intention to freshen things up. And I mean, you're going to see that in terms of song placement, improv, just everything. And we get a Rockdale opener here, and it had been a little while, and really nice to see that. And then you get a flood in Franklin Park, first time played. That was outstanding live. The Whales, Dr. Darkness, I'm Writing a Novel, Drive, Blood Buzz, Ohio, and Salt. And I think maybe we'll just do this by set here because there's a lot to get into. What did you think of set one overall, Alex?
Well, I thought it was a really clever way to kind of ease into shows with the shocking news about Jeff kind of coming so last minute. You start off with a big song in Rockdale, and you can immediately hear the difference, while also the band is setting the tone for the weekend as they're trying to figure things out a little bit. The vocal harmonies didn't sound quite as full and all that, but you get a ripping compact jam to start this, and the crowd's already going, okay, they're gonna keep playing their big songs this weekend. They're not holding anything back. We're gonna hit the ground running with this thing, and we're not gonna go into the typical short song opener and kind of ride it through the first set with a lot of shorter, less jammy stuff. So I really like the choice. But yeah, I really think that the highlights of the set came later, in my opinion, in terms of the improv, but a lot of really cool stuff early on. I don't know if we want to go song by song or if we want to go just highlights here, because I got a lot to say.
Start wherever you want to start, man. I got a lot to say too. So wherever you go, I'll be following.
All right. So any other thoughts on this Rockdale? Because I want to talk about Flood in Franklin Park a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think like it was really like anything crazy, like breaking the mold as far as Rockdale go. But I think the surprising thing there for me was more so that they opened with it. We just hadn't seen it in a little while, and it just kind of a brash approach to starting off the week, but in the best possible way. So that was most of the cool factor for me with Rockdale. But I'm definitely down to talk about Flood in Franklin Park if you want to.
Oh yeah, totally agree on the Rockdale. It's just like it was just a tone setter, and really great to see in the opening slot. But Flood in Franklin Park, I had never heard of this song. I'm not that familiar with Grant Green, and I really want to be after hearing this song, because I thought it was totally delightful, super jazzy tune. And we know all about Rick's we know all about Rick's kind of motivations about learning more about the jazz scene and some of his inspirations from that scene over the years from interviews we've heard with him. And this is a really, really, really cool track. And you got to see some jazzy Rick, which is getting kind of rarer and rarer sometimes. So really love to hear him tear it up on this. And hearing Cotter just kind of riding the bell of his cymbal the whole night was just really fun too. So I don't know. I was really enjoying it, really vibing with it, and I really want to see this now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also had never heard of it. I pulled open El Goose like within the first couple seconds just to see if maybe we had an early take on what it was, but it wasn't there. So I just kind of put my phone back in my pocket and just zoned in on it because it was such a cool tune. And it's got a really great swingy vibe to it. And I just think that it's a great cover to add to the arsenal because, as we all know, Goose is the greatest cover band to ever exist. And one of the things that makes them so great is just the sheer diversity in the things that they choose to cover. It just covers anything you could possibly think of, and even things that you can't think of because you don't know them like we didn't. So I definitely 100% agree. Flood in Franklin Park. Hope that one's here to stay. Very fun tune.
Well, the most disappointing thing I found about Flood in Franklin Park was immediately after the show was over, I went into Spotify and on YouTube and looked up the original version, and I found a live version by Grant Green, and he was ripping 14, 15 minutes on this thing like decades ago, and we only got 6 minutes out of Goose. So come on, guys. We need like a 30-minute Flood in Franklin Park banger.
Tough to please on the first time play too, man. Just expecting the world.
I mean, we got 38 minutes out of Big Modern first time play. Let's get 48 minutes out of Flood in Franklin Park, guys. Come on.
All right, you heard it here first. Coming this summer to a city near you. And so I for me, I can kind of lump these next three together. The Whales, Dr. Darkness, I'm writing a novel. They all kind of fill a similar role for me. I love all three songs. Don't get me wrong. Don't want to make it sound anything that it's not, but all kind of standard versions as they typically are. But do you have any thoughts on those three there in particular?
The only one that I really had some extended thoughts on, well, extended's a stretch, but really cool extended opening to the Whales. I thought it was really kind of neat, the intro to it, where you got these like reverby, delayed, atmospheric sounds that almost sounded like whale calls for the Whales to my ear. So really neat to hear that. And I really like an early Whales at the show. So I thought it was kind of nice to still get it early, even if it wasn't an opener like it usually is. And then Dr. Darkness, I always love that song coming from a more indie fandom background myself. I've always really enjoyed that more than I feel like the consensus. And same with I'm writing a novel. I think that the 5 songs they chose to open the show with nothing too jammy, but just enough improvisation thrown in was really, really clever for them to find their footing without Jeff. You could definitely kind of sense that they were still trying to figure things out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great call. I think that probably did factor in for sure. And while, like to your point, you did notice a little bit of the lacking harmonies on Rockdale. All of these songs kind of fit fairly easily in the wheelhouse of a four person group. So probably smartly chosen here. And I felt like that we didn't maybe have enough improv. I would have liked maybe one song that stretched a little bit further in here, but it doesn't really matter because one of my highlights from the entire run comes up next, and we've got Soccer, another awesome set one drive, just like last year, just like 2024. Goose setting tone and intention early with a massive drive. And this one was just so great. It got a nice ambient space to start off with. Rick bends over to, fiddle with effects and, do his carousel there for a bit until he's satisfied. And then he starts like sprinkling in some arpeggiated chords while Pete does some light lead work. I just love when they do two guitar Goose. And this is just such a great version of that. And when they shift the tempo up and things start to get really extra psychedelic with like this great low end buzz, we drop the intensity before they blast off in some of the greatest guitar playing you're ever going to hear from Rick. And yeah, this drive was just absolutely massive and ripped a hole in my brain.
Oh my gosh. Like you said, there's just something about your opening drives with Cotter in the band now. And you really nailed it on your takes here. I think it was really apparent to me during this jam, and it lasted through the whole run after this point, that Trevor and Cotter were just in such lockstep and have unlocked an entirely new level of connection between themselves. And then I also really wanted to shout out Getty, which shout out to the new lighting rig for this tour. But on this drive, if you're watching back the videos of it, there's a point during it when the jam's kind of getting kickstarted where you straight up feel like you're looking at a recreation of the Aurora Borealis. Like it's this green scene and you're
Yeah.
somehow creating shapes within the lights, and it looks like you're literally looking at like the best recreation you could possibly get without seeing the real thing. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, for sure. And I was kind of open to shouting out Getty at any point during this. Any place probably would have made sense because, my God, I mean, he already was like the best in the game, arguably. And you can make the argument for Kuroda, and a lot of people would. But outside of that, like, he was obviously killing it last year. And at Goosemas, we thought he leveled up a ton. And then to be, about 2 months later, even leveled up even more, like the stuff you're seeing. And I want to say that with every major jam, he really dressed them up. Like that's how I kind of look at it. All the ones that really deserved a lot of the razzle dazzle, Eddie made sure to really highlight it when the band was really digging in for something massive. And this drive was certainly that. Did you have anything else on this
Yep.
drive?
No, you said most of what I wanted to say. I think that just the Trevor and Cotter point was the main thing I wanted to make sure I got in there, and then just the way that Rick and Peter are kind of seamlessly trading off lead work on this thing too, especially towards the end, is just amazing.
Yeah, chemistry is absolutely off the charts across the band. And then we've got a really good cover. They always nail this one for me, Blood Buzz Ohio. It's one of my favorites for sure. And a really different Salt for me, anyways. I felt like Salt took a new direction here that was pretty awesome. It super fun, bouncy, happy, blissy jam that wasn't really what I was expecting out of Salt or the set closer. But any additional thoughts on these last two here to wrap up set one?
Blood Buzz Ohio, always welcome in a set list. I've talked about how much I love indie music, but I've never been much of a national guy. Just have never had them click with me for some reason. I've literally left their concert early like twice at a festival. I just don't like it for some reason, but I love when Goose covers them. So big fan of this cover. And Salt, wowie. Oh my gosh. Excellent closer. Well, you know we love it as a closer, as an encore. And I thought this version went into some really cool spaces, like you said, especially in that short 13, 14-ish minute runtime I had. Some really, really pretty keys work by Peter early on that leads to some kind of descending runs that goes into felt like the weird stepsister of like the Mist from last year's Cap run. Very blissy,
Yes.
extended peak that you can't help but smile the entire time. And then you kind of touch on the darker tones a little bit late to get back into that iconic Salt headbanging riff to take us out in the set break. But I thought it was one of those where you looked at your watch and like, how did they cover this much ground in this short of a jam? And that's another theme that we see in some of these jams through the week, is that they're just hitting the ground running and covering a lot of concepts very quick.
Yeah, I think and what I'm hoping we'll see a lot more of in 2025 is that you're going to start seeing a lot more with Goose where it doesn't necessarily need to be 20 minutes plus to be a contender for Jam of the Year. I think you're going to start because the efficiency is just off the charts right now. And I think with all the new directions they all are taking, the chemistry being off the charts and the efficiency with how they're getting to their points that they want to make, I think it's going to be a lot more likely in the future here that, 16 and 17-minute jams can hold just as much weight as the longer ones. And I think this Salt is kind of a step in that direction, I hope. But moving on to set two, they waste no time getting the party started right back up with an absolutely massive Creatures in a very good slot for it, in my opinion. And it continues a recent trend of this song sticking fairly close to the electronic dancey vibes that have been kind of the staple of the end of 2024. And some similarities for me with the Goosemas version, but I feel like this one they they took their time a bit more and maybe not as much pedal to the floor as quickly. And it's ironic that I was just praising them for their efficiency, but I actually feel like in this case, taking their time paid big dividends for me, anyways.
Yeah, that's definitely no knock on a patient jam versus one where you're just hitting the ground running here. And yeah, this one definitely had that 70s dance party kind of vibe to it, similar to Goose Miss in a lot of ways. But that more minimalist jam to kind of start things off was really, really fun, with kind of Peter rocking those staccato, chirpy hits and Rick dancing around it with these like velvety, smooth licks that picked up until the disco fever hit. I really loved that. And then we got to talk about this transition that went into Atlas Dogs here, because that was flawless. But you could pick up on Rick kind of teasing the transition really early in the jam, infusing it with a little bit of that disco flavor. And it almost felt like we were getting like a DJ mashup of the two tracks that you hear like if you're at the club or something, where it's like an extended crossover between the two songs. And it was just really, really fun, and it was all working for me.
Yeah, I mean, continuing another trend from the end of 2024. I mean, these transitions just keep getting more and more out of control, and the different ways they blend songs into the ends of the song. I mean, it's just been absolutely mind blowing lately. And super huge fan of this Atlas Dogs as well. I feel very blessed to have been at the Raleigh show where they also jammed it out. Also had the Tarantella Napolitanos teases. Come with me to shows if you want to get jammed out dogs, I guess. It wasn't quite at the level of Raleigh for me, but still really damn good. And just hoping for more jammed out dogs at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's an absolute treat to hear a jammed out Atlas Dogs, and you are the magnet for it. I had that in my notes first thing. It stayed pretty true to that kind of triplet feel of Dogs. Like it was great. The early portion of the jam almost sounded like it could be like interlude 4 or something to me. It was really, really cool.
Yes.
And it just built. Yeah, it just like built, and then it got to the I can't even say that word. I won't even try. The Napolitanities from Rick, and you hit the fiery peak at the end of it. So really, really great. And then after that peak, it's almost like this jarring break that breaks things down to a more chill groove. And we get a transition into Animal here. So out of left field, but once again, so well executed. This transition, to my ear, when I was listening kind of live, my first impression was like, this kind of sounds like Butter Rum. I thought I was going into that. It's kind of got like more of like that kind of looser feel to it. And then all of a sudden, you're in the intro of Animal, and I think I felt that way because Peter was kind of doing his thing on the marimba and carried that into Animal with the marimba versus the clav he normally starts off with, which really cool. Like I'll take some variants like that all day.
Yeah, it was really fun too. Like live, it took me like about 5 or 10 seconds to realize we were transitioning. Like I needed like one or two of those like really spaced out F chords before I could like pick up like, oh, this is happening. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm normally, I don't want to say disappointed, but normally when Animal comes up, I'm normally thinking about the other songs that I would like more in that slot. And this Animal maybe circumvented my expectations more than any song from the entire week, because this felt like maybe some of the freshest improv that they did with anything. I mean, you would never before this show, I don't think, have placed this jam with Animal. It was some of the absolutely most beautiful bliss I think that they've ever played. It's not the longest jam in the world, but they, going back to chemistry, are just all so in sync here. Peter is so incredibly gifted at finding lines on keys to either sync up with or bolster what Rick is doing with the lead. And their togetherness here reminds me so much of the really gorgeous end section of Dripfield and St. Augustine in that regard. And Trevor has some of the most insanely melodic playing here, sometimes letting notes drone out. Other times he's squeezing it in between Rick and Peter. And Cotter is just playing like the bubbliest stuff I've ever heard him play. It's probably my favorite Animal just because it felt like such a new, fresh direction. And, that was kind of the case for the whole weekend.
I'm forever going to stand with the Animal because that's the greatest guest spot this band will ever have. There's never going to be a more famous person on stage with them. But this is the most uplifting soaring Animal you'll ever hear. And I hope it's a reminder to you of your early Goose days when you heard Animal for the first time and you were like, this band is sick. This song rules, because it's such a great gateway
Yes.
song into getting new fans. And it can be so fun if it's done right. It just, if you get into the same routine of the jams all kind of going to the same place, I can see why you might feel that way. But this was a huge diversion from that. And full melody mode Rick was here, living up the bliss while Peter latched onto that marimba sound, like I said, and just kind of danced around him. And then to kind of signal a transition to get the jam moving in another direction, we got Peter switching over to the organ. So that was kind of a theme of the week too, where it's like Peter switching instruments equals new part of the jam. I noticed in a lot of my notes. But yeah, that was the signal of the transition to get back into Animal, and the band immediately latched on and was like, boom, let's get back into Animal, finish this thing out with a bang. And like I said, the song gets some hate, but that was an awesome 17-minute ride.
Yeah, and let me just clarify and make sure my words come across exactly as softly as I mean them. I like the song Animal. I even enjoy the comically silly lyrics. It's just like Alex said, especially like once we've had the podcast and everything, and you're listening to every song and every version 100 times, it's not that you're upset that Animal's getting played, it's that you're nervous Animal's going to be the same as the last 20 Animals. But this was so fresh and I needed injected directly into my veins. And if you are a fan of Bliss, then I would say go here first. This was outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of weird placement for me for the next song. We get Draconian here, which again, I find it a little bit odd, but I feel like after that beautiful Bliss, we needed to get our hands a little dirty at this point. So it made me happy. And I feel like this one was cousin of the New Year's Eve Draconian in a lot of ways. It was not exactly the same, but it felt like similarly inspired. And I'll just put these two together because I think they're both pretty good. But we arrive at this Arcadia, which, if it's not better than Goosemas, which we said at the time was best in years, it's at least comparable for me and on a similar level. So, any thoughts on these last two here, Alex?
A Draconian is a banger. It's ever since it was introduced at Homedale, I immediately loved it, and I think it's taken some time to grow on some folks. Like, I've gotten a lot of messages in that regard. But I thought it was really interesting this week that Cotter had an interview drop that was done months ago, but it dropped this week on the Best Show Ever podcast with Cam Hurt. And he talks about his early music tastes and how he used to go to the Warp Tour and he was kind of like a scene kid. And you can hear that in this song a little bit, his early influences, which I just thought was like, oh, this is so validating. I thought this the whole time. He confirmed it on this podcast. But yeah, total clav party on this Draconian. Like you said, it almost felt like the cousin of the New Year's Eve one. And I thought it was really cool the way that Rick and Trevor were kind of trading shots back and forth on this Draconian, which was a little different from what we heard on New Year's. But seems like Peter just keeps stepping up his clav party game, and just sick hard rock licks have been coming out of it, especially in Draconian.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit here too on this Arcadia because I really did dig it quite a bit, but it kind of starts off in this like aimless, ambient, spacey vibes, and then they kind of move into Bliss and go into this towering peak. And when they come back for the outro, one of the cooler things I thought from the whole 3-day run was they slowed things down to the point to where they almost weren't even playing. And I think a lot of people in the crowd thought that they might just let it fade out from there. It almost like they did a great job of convincing you that they might just fade it out for once, but then they bring it back to the typical outro and brought down the house with maybe the most intense light show I've ever witnessed. My God, Getty, like that was bananas.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's Arcadia was a beast. And I think I'm feeling pretty safe to say Arcadia is back in 2025, especially after we've gotten this many sick versions in a row. And we're recording this on Wednesday, February 12th, right now in the evening. And we watched them play another Arcadia in Toronto. We'll talk about in our next episode, I'm sure. But holy crap, Arcadia is in such a great spot. And it's just like exciting to see where the improv is going to go again. And that's just such a nice feeling to have with such a big song in the catalog. But really cool ambient space that they hit, like you talked about, that just explodes into that finish. And it's really a special song no matter where it is in a set list. But if we're gonna get improv like this and like monstrous finishes like this that are coming from like unexpected places, I feel like an Arcadia closer just kind of feels like home.
Hey man, I'm a big fan of Arcadia either as the set closer and the encore. I think that's like its two best slots. I know Factory gets all the love and rightfully so, but I want to close shows with Arcadia. And if you're going to give me Arcadias like this, then I'm almost going to demand that they close shows because that's where it deserves to be. It's so exciting, like to your point, that I feel also confident we can say
Yeah.
Arcadia is fully back. And that's just really exciting place to be going into this year. So last song on the docket, we've got Turbulence in the encore. Any thoughts on the song or the placement here?
I kind of like Turbulence as an encore, and they spent so much time improving during the main sets that they kind of had to go with something short here, and I'm good with it. It's a fun song. I really like the storytelling, kind of Matt Campbell-y vibes that you can get from some of these songs like Turbulence. So I'm here for it. As much as I'd love like a 20-minute banger or something in the encore, like I understand what the time crunch is. You got to play something fun and short, and this works.
Yeah, I like it. Considering it's the first show of the year, I think this song is very original sounding. It has a lot of different musical styles all contained within. So if you're a new fan, I think walking away from your first show that night, I'm sure there were at least a handful of first time showgoers there. I think that's kind of a great theme to end on. You know, hey, this is kind of a welcome to Goose because this is kind of what they do. They venture all over musically, and that's kind of what Turbulence does. But gorgeous song. I loved it there. Nice 10-minute version. Great way to end night one.
Yeah.
So, way more important than night one, though. Night two, Friday, 2/7/25. Alex and Sarah arrive in town to join me for this amazing concert. And we start off with one of your favorite new songs of the 2024 season, One In, One Out. We've got Green River, Hot Love, Lead Up, Cover of Atlas, The Empress of Organos, California Magic, and Flow Down. Where do you want to start? Pretty much just a little bit of everything here.
Yeah, this is just such an extensive run. Like normally we like to run through highlights, but I feel like we just kind of got to run through the set list on this because there's just so much to talk about in between songs and everything too.
Yep.
So One In, One Out. Interesting that it's always been played in set one since its debut, but never as an opener yet. And obviously, I'm always really excited when a Goose show starts. But when I started hearing One In, One Out, I was kind of like, oh, this is an opener. And it kind of like piqued my interest to be like, let's see how this works. And then about 45 seconds and I was like, I'm locked in. This is pretty great. Really, really terrific choice for an opener. It feels like almost a slow groove highlight reel for Peter, just laying down kind of gorgeous keys work and doing some terrific marimba work. And he kind of takes charge often during the singing and the jam portion of the song. So I thought it was a really, really nice way to start the show and get a little bit of improv. And I just kind of wish it was longer, but we had bigger and better things to get to.
Yeah, definitely. You know, bringing up just the slotting here, I kind of suspected that it had never been played as an opener because it felt weird to me here. But as I've listened to this show a few times, I actually think that this song may work best for me as an opener. I think it's just a fun, kind of slightly mellow, but not really way to start out the evening, and usually builds to a pretty uplifting peak. This one, I agree, tons of creativity from Peter on keys. He was all over the place, but also really big fan of Cotter. Just had like a really good groovy sense on his playing on this one. And the pocket was just, it felt like everyone was in a really good place, specifically to kind of the loose way that he was playing the kit. And I thought those were the two things that really stood out to me. And then, you know, to get Green River in the two slot, it's obviously such a classic song and one of the more classic staples for Goose. They've been playing it since 2016. It was just so happy to catch it, and I think that's a great slot for it. And I think that these two made like a hell of a 1-2 combo for just, hey, let's get this Friday night going the right way.
Yeah, definitely. And Green River was like the last song I'd expect to get a transition out of from One In, One Out. We're used to seeing it with some other more, you know, more rock adjacent kind of CCR vibes songs, I feel like, than One In, One Out. But hey, I am here for these left turn transitions. And again, another seamless transition into Green River. Terrific tune. Really enjoyed it. And it felt like this was going to be kind of a precursor to one of those nights where you couldn't predict anything that was coming for the rest of the night.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that was just what made this 3-night run so special. It was just the most surprising and shocking at all corners. And then just from every angle, you're just like, what is even happening? But right after that, you go into Hot Love and Lead Up. And I'll just kind of pair those together because they're both a little bit on the shorter side. Obviously, both incredible songs. I think Hot Love is definitely one of those songs where literally it can go in any slot and it's going to probably work, other than maybe set two closer. And Lead Up is also an amazing song that I think that they should probably play it more than they do. But I don't know. At this point, I was a little bit thirsty for some improv. One In, One Out gave me a little bit, but for night two, I was expecting one banger by this point in the evening. But really good songs, and it all kept the energy up. So, if anything, I would say through the first four here, we're cooking. But anything that you've got on those two, Alex?
Hot Love, you said it. Always an injection of energy, but not a lot of improv there. Just a really fun time. And Lead Up, I love this song. It's probably one of my, being a little hasty here, it's probably one of my favorites in the catalog to hear when I see pop up at a show, even though it's short. I just think it'd be so cool to see it get jammed out sometime. It's got the room for it. Like, you get these crazy solos during it that are nice and compact, but like, let's get like a 13-minute lead up or something, because they're always like 6.
I 1,000% agree. I don't see any reason why Lead Up couldn't function just like Drive does or similar to Drive. I feel like they could operate in very similar veins when it comes to improv.
Yeah, right. That's actually a great call there, Mike. They're very similar in terms of structurally where they could move to into a jam. I just think it's got such a cool feel to it, and it could really go some interesting places.
Yeah, no, we're definitely in lockstep on that. Humongous fan of Lead Up. I don't really feel like I hear the fan base talk about it with the regard that maybe we hold it in, but maybe I just like it so much because I see the same potential in it that you see in it. But either
Yeah.
way, we were lacking a little bit on the improv, and fortunately, the very next song, Atlas, covered by the Wood Brothers, I definitely would not have picked beforehand this as a top candidate for getting run, but so happy it did. It was super funky, extra crunchy collab from Pete, but they slow it down to this chilled out, groovy. I don't even want to call it a play. It's just like an absolute groove. And when the synth work comes in, Cotter's like dragging the tom for a bit on the way down to the snare. I was starting to lose my balance. This was so groovy. The synths start to get pretty trippy after a while, and Pete is playing like every effect he has. And when they slow it down, Trevor just does some amazing sprinkling of phrases in there. Peter comes full circle to his piano, and they just have this gorgeous melodic blissed out space. I am shocked by how good this Atlas is.
It's absolutely terrific, but real quick, are you sure you weren't stumbling because of all the goose juice we had in the venue? Because that was some pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, full disclosure, I was a little turned on night two. I had the best time of my life, but this Atlas definitely played a role in the unsteadiness for sure. I think the raccoon hat I was wearing maybe unbalanced me as well. I don't know. That was a factor possibly.
Of course, yeah. I gotta mention the goose juice, the signature drink of the venue, because they were pouring them heavy. But you said it, man. This is the longest version of Atlas on record, and I think the last one even close to this length was 2022 in New Haven, Connecticut, at Westville. So special version of this, and it's got a nice slow funk to it, like you said. Dare I say, a pastor rap groove.
No.
Get the pew pew synth from Peter, taking us back to the 80s arcade. Like,
Here we go again.
I was kind of feeling it. So no, this actually almost felt like an extension of the One In, One Out jam to me in a lot of ways, and it almost felt like you were getting a One In, One Out sandwich, even though it wasn't on the set list, because they're very very similar in feel, jams wise.
Yeah, I totally glossed over that. I actually wrote that down. Rick definitely had some one in, one out teases here. And that ascent up Bliss Mountain when they go down and then back up again, I just think that if Bliss is your jam, you really are going to find so much to love about this Milwaukee run because we already talked about that Animal. This Atlas is something else. But again, just continuing momentum from here. I can't really be upset about improv anymore because now we get this ridiculous Empress, which is an absolute beast. And I feel like I talked way too much about Atlas. So why don't you just rip off with your thoughts about this Empress, Alex?
There's so much about this Milwaukee run where I feel like I need 2 more weeks to even fully process what the hell happened because it was all just so incredible. But going into the weekend, my wife loves Empress, and we were talking on the plane, and we were like, I don't know if they're gonna play Empress. It's such a Jeff song. Maybe they'll shelve it until things get sorted there. It's just become such a big Jeff song over the years. But boy, am I glad I was wrong there. Even though the timbales and the percussion textures he adds were really missed throughout, this is just a really fun jam, and it's always a treat to get a jammed out Empress. It's really tough to even call it a jam because it was really like the Rick show, a lot of it, really shreddy, hitting that octave kind of digital sauce fuzz sound that he likes to use often while Peter was surrounding him with some really great light clav work. And Trevor, even though it's a subtle presence, is a strong presence, keeping things locked down with Cotter as they're spicing up the arrangement, really trying to fill in the gaps where we normally get that extra flavor from Jeff. And I really wanted to live in this really much longer, even though we closed out the set with 2 more songs. We got kind of a Middle Eastern vibe inspired outro with some tumble teases to close it out to take us in the transition. But I was really thinking, like, holy crap, this might go all the way to set break here. This is getting close to when you'd expect set break to be. And, we're getting tumble teases. This could go another 10 minutes. But nope, surprising pivot into the most unexpected of songs.
Yeah, you nailed it. This Empress was just ridiculous. Peter on clav and Rick with that extra crunchy trail mix distortion. And when they get to that up tempo section, I don't even really know how to describe it, but I'll try. I came up with Vampire Nightclub, Werewolf Rave, and Voldemort Discotheque because it's a little hard to describe, but it obviously clearly doesn't sound like dance or techno, but it has the same pulse of that music, and yet it has also these dark undercurrents to it, but that are also a little bit playful. So that's kind of where my mind was at. But it's just so freaking unique that for especially for an Empress, like this
Totally.
jam doesn't even necessarily belong here, like you could say about so many of these jams. But God bless, an amazing Empress, very high on my list for early Jam of the Year contenders, at least of what we've had so far. But you mentioned it, they subtly fade out into a very shocking song placement, California Magic, which it worked well in this slot for
Yeah.
me, even though it was so surprising because it plays a little bit off of the same vibe that Atlas has as a song. And so I feel really connected to this whole set by, we had one out, then we get one in, one out teases, and then we have the California Magic, which I feel like has a very similar progression to Atlas. So everything just felt so tight and tied together. Very into it. Not a lot of improv, but it worked for me.
No, I kind of like it too. A big part of why I enjoy going to Goose shows so much is getting these out of left field, unexpected things, whether it's in the improv, it's in the slotting, it's in the transitions. So California Magic, a nice little cool down from a fiery, fiery shred fest in Empress, like I said. And just backtracking real quick, I know I said it wasn't really like fair to call it a jam, but it really was cool to see like the band morphing the jam around Rick just continuing like this similar sound he had and shredding through it all. It was just like really cool to see like the textures change there. But yeah, the transition to California Magic was like, wow, this band can really transition any song into anything here. And it just felt like a nice cool down. And then we got an even more unexpected closer to the set, I feel like, with a flow down, right? Like you expect a flopener, but we got a flozer.
Is that what we're going with, Flozer? Oh
I'm gonna
goodness.
keep saying it till we stop laughing at it. Yeah.
It's gonna be a while. Um It's a really good flow down. I think if I'm being nitpicky, this is the only song I'd move the whole night. I would have chose to move this to a different slot for sure, but it was a really great version. And two nights in a row, we're going out high energy into set break, which at the end of the day, I'm never going to quibble too much about that. I think you should end on a high whenever you're ending the set. So it was a strong close. It's not going over the Empress or the Atlas, but I mean, the end stretch of this is just all vibes.
Yeah, and Flowdown can be kind of divisive on the online community, but you wouldn't know it being at the show with the dancing and the crowd pop it got. And it's a high energy song. So, people love it in person. So you might as well mess around with slotting and see how it goes, seeing it in a different place for once. And I thought it worked all right. I wasn't mad about it in person.
Yeah, no, same. And I'm always going to favor variety over everything else. You made a really good point. That's, why Goose is our favorite band is and why you never have a bad show is because you're constantly surprised. So even if you don't get what you want, you get what you need. Moving into set 2 though. I've got big thoughts on set 2 and I'm sure you do as well. I'm sure everyone at home does cuz we start off with Madhuvan in the best possible slot for me. And oh
Mm-hmm.
boy, is it a good one. I mean, aren't all of them, but this one just starts off right away throwing curveballs, just strange, sparse arrangement with lots of bizarre and discordant notes and tones. Felt like you were in a mirror funhouse, and it had maybe a lot in common with the Rockdale from Westville. But any thoughts on just this ridiculous opener here?
So, spoiler alert, this is definitely my highlight of the whole weekend. Very well might be the peak of Dark Goose that we've ever seen from this band. And it's an incredible accomplishment to get a jam out of this while you're already out of your comfort zone, missing a band member on hiatus. So while I'm still processing this entire run, it's one of those songs where you see it in person, you're like, I know I just witnessed one of the most special moments in Goose history right here. And right from the jump, the solo gets started, and Trevor is loud and up front and in charge from the jump. The band's kind of adding some atmosphere around his sinister licks before they all jump on board with the same riff and get into like headbanging metal Goose territory, which you're already like, this is different. And then things start to go off the rails in like the best kind of way, where we get into this speedy power chord riff where Rick and Peter are doing some of like the best two guitar Goose you'll ever hear. And the wildest thing is that they're like so in lockstep, they're not even looking at each other. It's like they're all in mind meld mode. Like they've all figured out the matrix and are just like seeing the code in front of them as they play. And Rick is just taking this ripping solo to pull us out of that darkness for a little bit, but it's like, nope, we're going to stay dark here. Peter wants to lay down these crunchy power chords behind him, and you get like a triumphant kind of feel and then more darkness tease before ripping right back into the Madhuvan outro at like hyper speed. But like I said, I think I need 100 more listens to this thing because there's so much to say on it, and I can't even like fully fathom everything we witnessed. But the crowd pop afterwards was, I think, the loudest of the weekend. And listening back to the Nugs version of this and watching the video from YouTube, it was like goosebump inducing to hear that crowd pop afterwards, because like it's one of those things, like I said, in the moment you're looking around at everyone and everyone's like, we just saw something incredibly special.
1,000% agree. It's my number one highlight. And if I had gone to Milwaukee and just heard this one song, it would have been worth it for me. And I love how you called it out. I think by far the highlight for me was that Trevor did tease that like 3-chord, 3-note riff like 2 or 3 times in the beginning. And the fact that they came back and built the end part of the jam around that, it was just very cool. Like, obviously, Trevor is the man and absolutely capable of stuff like that, but you don't as often see them take the jam and make the theme around whatever Trevor is teasing. So, just very, very cool, and absolutely agree with everything you said. New territory for this band. Number one highlight of the run. Number one highlight of the year for me, quite easily. But no time to catch your breath because Redbird's on deck. And this one is,
No kidding.
like them all, incredible. And I know Redbird is your favorite song, so I definitely want you to start off. Give me all your thoughts on this Redbird because it's amazing.
Yeah. This jam is definitely, I feel like, going to be slept on. Already kind of is, just following up such an insane Madhuvan like that. But I don't know that in terms of 2025 Goose that you can get a better 1-2 punch than these two songs back to back with the way they're playing right now, and them both just being probably the most consistent improv vehicles this band has. Immediate emotional shift between the two. Like, they're polar opposites, but the recipe in the construction is weirdly similar when I was breaking it down, because we get the jam kicked off here again with Trevor with some like muddy bass setting a layer that everyone latches onto and builds around. Peter starts kind of working the keys around him, and Rick is rocking some kind of like digital sauce that he rides throughout. But it just kind of builds and builds around that one concept into this really lovely blissy peak that gives everyone this nice kind of contrast between what they just heard, and you get to relax a little bit and enjoy life after kind of like being dragged into hell and back with that Madhuvan. And then we take things down into like this loose, flowy, heavenly space where you could almost hear a whisper in the room at one point. And we're turning the notch and rapidly taking it up to 11. It's like the little kid playing with the radio for the first time and just cranks the dial up all of a sudden. And we're just hitting the second jam really quick, but it's amazing. And you hit a glorious second peak on the song. And I just want to say, I got to revisit this again, but I think this might be the second best song of the weekend. If you argued that, I wouldn't have any complaints with that, because honestly, it's just like following up such a big song like Madhuvan is a tough place to be, and they still crushed the assignment on this. Also, shout out to Cotter. He's got 4 arms of steel because he was hitting 16th notes on that ride cymbal the entire fucking jam.
So well said. And I knew that you would have a lot for that one. So the only thing I wrote was the liftoff for that first peak. The only way I can think to describe it is that is Levitation Homes. Like, full on in the clouds,
100%.
in the sky. Like, I mean, unreal. I've had like so many of the best jams from this run ranked anywhere from 6 to 1. This Redbird's been ranked 1. It's been ranked 4 already within just a couple of days of being at these shows. So I feel like, to your point, everything's got an argument for the number 1 spot because the quality is just so high throughout the major jams from this run.
Totally. And like, it's not my personal favorite or my number 2 after reflecting, but I listened back to it today. I was like, am I making the right call here? Because this is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And then right after that, we get another thing that I know we both were amazed and thankful and grateful and all of the above for. True Love Waits, one of the best covers, one of my other favorite bands. Kind of needed a cool down, honestly, after 2 of, like, to your point, best back-to-back jams in a pretty long time. So amazing cool down, amazing song. So lucky to get that one. And we really needed it because not only did we need a cool down from the last 2, the one after this, spoiler, enormous.
Yeah, we got a Radiohead cover, dude. Like, all we need now is like 18 more of those, and we'll be set in terms of our fandom, right?
Yep, exactly.
But awesome treat. I thought this one landed way better than the one that debuted at Bonner. I think the placement here was absolute chef's kiss perfection as a cool down off of that heater of a Redbird. And it served as kind of a nice palate cleanser into the next song, which you loved. So I'll let you talk on it more because I think you have more notes than me on this Arrow.
I do like it when we get a hot Arrow, and this one was pretty hot. It starts off in a fairly familiar space for Arrow if you've listened to a bunch of them, but it takes on this very fast, funky, slightly off balance disco vibe. It's kind of a fresh face for Arrow, in my opinion. Felt in some ways like I was listening to something that might happen after a Creatures or Feel It Now, or even in some ways reminiscent of the Get Down Tonight jam. Rick's playing in this is just simply out of this world. I can't say that enough. I truly feel like it always is, but the effect and tone, and he just pulled so much melody out of what for me was one of the more original jams of the weekend, and like some of the musical territory that I would say is like least familiar to them. So it was just so freaking impressive, and he just continues to amaze me at how he can inhabit any musical zone and dominate it.
Dude, it's so funny you mentioned Goose and Get Down Tonight, because the first thing I said was this feels like the cousin of some of those 1975 themed jams we got at Goose. Straight
Awesome.
funky banger. And like Sarah and I were dancing in the aisle. We had like the coolest seats on night 2, where we had like 8 seats worth of open space next to us before the next set of seats up on the balcony. So there's so much room to dance, and we were dancing so hard to this Arrow. And there was a riff that Rick latched onto towards the end of this jam that reminds me so much of something we've heard lately, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I can't it's been driving me crazy, so I'm sure I'll think of it like 7 episodes from now randomly and just shout it out, and everyone will think I have Tourette's or something. But yeah, I thought it was great.
Or anyone out there, if you have an inkling as to what Alex may be hearing in his head in this arrow, please send it in to us. Let us know what you're hearing.
Yeah, please do.
And I just feel like this show is just like getting so insane because we've already talked about so much. And then we get Jeff Engborg. Like what the hell is even happening on this night in
Dude.
Milwaukee? Shocking. Did not see it coming at all. I don't know if you did, but just completely out of left field.
No chance I saw this coming. But you forgot to mention the most important part, which was the "Let's get ready to rumble" intro that Pete played before the song got started.
Yes, absolutely. How could I forget?
But as soon as the first notes of Engborg hit, I think my head might have hit the ceiling of the venue. I was so stoked. And it feels like, speaking of the Matrix reference earlier, I'm just going to make another reference to it now. But it feels like ever since SPAC last year, when Engborg kind of had a little comeback, that Peter is just seeing the Matrix when he's playing the clav, especially on Engborg. Just nasty, nasty stuff. And a really nice kind of high energy ride to continue off of that arrow energy. But works so well in what I thought was the closer spot. I was so pumped. And I was thinking the whole time, like, this is just such a great choice to close a set. Wow, I can't believe they're doing this. But I've been shocked by this seemingly every time since it's been happening lately. But we go back into Empress as an outro to Engborg and finish out the sandwich there, and did not expect to ever see that come out of Engborg at all, especially kind of with like the dark rave vibes we were getting towards the end of that Engborg. But once again, totally bamboozled here, and it all worked for me.
Yeah, it was almost too much back-to-back shocks like this because between Engberg and then you forgot about Empress, or we both did anyways, and you just like smacked in the face twice. It was like whiplash almost, but just electric finish. And then the encore, maybe they go a different route with all this energy to close. No, they bring out Turn On Your Love Light. So, I mean, I just cannot imagine floating out of a venue the way we did on any higher vibrations. Like this was just like, how did this all happen in one night, dude?
Yeah, no kidding. And there was plenty more to come. Real quick on the Love Light, when they came back on stage, Pete shouted out that Trevor had asked to switch to this song. It was originally supposed to be Slow Ready on the printed set list, our namesake. But take a Love Light. We're kind of magnets for it. We've gotten 3 of those at 3 shows we've been to together. So
We are.
love a Love Light.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely not going to complain about it, although it's always nice to get our namesake when we're both at a show. So that would have been really cool as well. But I think it worked. Like we just kept the energy up to end the show and send everyone out with smiles on their face. So
Yeah. So anything else on night 2 before we chat a little bit about the flow down we went to before night 3?
no, let's get into the flow down. Let's talk about it. What a great time that was.
Yeah, I just want to shout out the incredible flow down put on by Indeed Brewing Company with lots of familiar faces there. Got to meet so many of you and drink way too much of that Dripfield lager. It was a lager. I don't even remember what it was. We had a good time getting sauced with all the honkers. But so much great merch there, so much creativity on display, and the place was packed the entire time. Like from start to finish. It was just an incredibly well-run event. So any thoughts you have on that, Mike? I wanted to make sure we shouted that out before we moved on.
No, yeah, I mean, it was an amazing event. I thought it came together really well. I think the one thing that I noticed the more like Goose weekends and flow downs and other things that I go to, I just am in constant awe as to how cool of a music community this band has. It's just, I mean, to your point, tons of creativity, obviously, so many amazing artists that work in this space, but also just, not that there aren't any bad apples, but for the most part, by and large, like Goose people are like the salt of the earth, and everyone was just so kind to me and you as well, and just us in general. And there's just a lot of love between everyone, and everyone for the most part was just super cool to each other, as you would hope they would be. And I feel like for the most part, these events and the fans represent the band very well. So came away from the flow down on a high, just like the last one we went to.
Yeah, it's terrific. Finally got to meet some friends we've interviewed on the podcast, like Corey and Basty from WTED and our friend Kelsey from Jively Designs. And we hope to have so many more folks we've met on for interviews. So thought it was a really great event to get to see everybody and give a lot of hugs out and get the vibes at an all-time high for night 3.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to get used to, as a sidebar, asking people personal questions in an interview before I meet them in person, but very rewarding when I do get to meet you. So it was super cool.
So ready to get into night 3?
Yeah, let's do it. Big night 3. Probably the best of the night, I think, for me. I don't know. It's hard to say because we just went off about how great the Madhavan and Redbird were, but big surprise to start off. Into the Mist opener. Hasn't happened in forever. Obviously insane. I think it only happened one other time, and it was like 5 years ago. Can't even begin to explain how excited I was. And again, the vibe of this entire weekend was just so apparent with Goose choosing to open it up with this. And the Silver Rising, Turn Clouds, No California, Everything Must Go, Big Modern. That's your first set. It's just absolutely enormous. I'm open to starting wherever you want because all of these are pretty much A plus.
Yeah, once again, I feel like we got to just run through it because this is just an insane night where left turns all over the place. But you mentioned the Into the Mist, second time it's ever opened, like you said, but the first time I believe ever at a Goose headlining show. I think the last time they were at opening for another act. So you could hear an immediate shift in how the band wants to jam out Mist from last year. It felt like a huge departure. And right off the jump, we're hitting this energetic jamming around like this like crunchy 3-shot pattern. Peter's working the clav, and before you know it, Cotter is kind of shifting the tempo while also changing the feel to a jazzier style to move the jam in a new direction. And we're getting this cool kind of like teeter-totter between jazz and rock, depending on where you're listening to the band. I noticed on each listen. So depending on what you were focusing on, you could get a really totally different experience, which I found to be really, really rewarding. And the band eventually really starts to lean into the rock side of things, and we close out with a glorious dance party. So I think it's one of the best ways you can start a Goose show with a Mist. I mean, come on. Can you beat that?
No, it's one of the best songs in the catalog. And like I said, it kind of summarizes and is a perfect microcosm of the spirit of this run. Just complete originality placing it here, and also the direction of the improv. Very rambunctious and funky, and not the standard blissed out versions we've gotten used to. So, really amazing stuff there. And then moving in, Silver Rising and Turn Clouds, both two of the best songs in the catalog. Just not as long as we'd like them to be, but really like the slotting here. I mean, if you look at these first 3 in order, this is a very, very good flow to get into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 2 more fan favorites here with Silver Rising and Turn of Clouds. Love to see them both early in a set like this. When it comes to Silver Rising, especially, I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately when we've talked about it, but it feels like there's just been like a switch flipped where it's got some extra mustard on it lately. And shout out real quick that this is allegedly the longest track on the studio album from the leaked song lengths we've gotten. So it's going to be the jam of the year at 9 minutes or whatever. Just calling it.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it best here early in the set, and Turn Clouds just never disappoints. But I was really shocked that after that we got No California at a winter tour Midwestern stop. Again, just like I'm gonna get old saying it, but just everything they were doing on this run was just, challenging expectations. It was very, very hard to predict at all with any certainty what was coming. But I was over the moon with No California. I don't know about you.
I think you're going to need like 2 shoulder replacements from how hard I grabbed you when No California started, because this cover is the best, dude. And
That's
perfect song placement. Like perfect song placement, middle of the first set like this. It's been stuck in my head ever since the show's over. But I just absolutely love this cover, and I hope it gets a lot of love in 2025 because it's just terrific.
Yeah, you and me both. I think I listened to it 3 times during my work day today. It's just absolutely obsessed at this point. And strap the fuck in for this next one because EMG is the absolute bona fide goods. Dark, moody, 80s rock, and they just wander in and out of progressions until they slow the evil Goose down into a more stripped down but foreboding place and build it back up into one of the scariest peaks that morphs back into EMG right at the top of that scary mountain. Insane.
I don't think I could say it much better than that. That's concise and perfect. But this was the beginning of an insane run of some of the most mind-blowing improvisation you'll ever hear from Goose, like consecutively through the rest of his show, basically. And Peter was wearing this like weird shirt with these eyes sewn on the back, and it seems like the entire band just kind of like unlocked their third eye. It went full Zen mode with the start of this jam at EMG. You talked about it, descending 4-note run that the band builds around that's kind of like spooky, while Cotter is going like absolutely ham early on, where he's like doing his best Joe Russo impression, it feels like, where it's like, does this guy have 6 arms? Such controlled chaos with Cotter. I was like, it's like I didn't know I could be more impressed with this man. And then the back half of this jam with the dissonant guitar from Rick and Peter laying down these like incredible laser sounds and synth textures with piano shots somehow thrown in. Did he grow a third arm too? I was like, what the hell's going on? Uh, the uneasy tension that was forming in the room that like really almost you were like wondering, are they ever going to release this tension? This is just like so creepy, but so amazing. I thought it was honestly going to be the set closer because it was like, this is just incredible. But no, we got more after this. And just an outstanding, moody, dark Goose in a totally different way than that Madhuvan.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, I do think this is one of the best runs of songs you'll ever see from Goose. This EMG straight through the next 3 or 4 is just absolute madness. We're going to cross through sets here, but it's just banger after banger when it comes to improv. This Big Modern, I mean, comes up next year. What can't this song do? It changes its look every show. This one has a very exploratory feel at first, but builds into quite a dance party by the end of the first section and just never really quite lets its foot off the gas. Rick particularly slayed this, just bouncing frantically from one idea to the next with 100% success rate. Unbelievable set closer.
Yeah, this Big Modern was really, really going places. And I feel like if it had another 5 to 10 minutes on it, like it could like easily be like everyone's GOAT Big Modern because they got kind of out of that normal Southern rock feel you often see Goose lean into early and go into that super dancey vibe, like you said. And it was one of those like everyone's feeling great in the crowd, hands in the air, riding the wave. And at one point, I just had to get my phone out with Getty's lights, and I sent some buddies who aren't as sold on Goose a clip of this, and they're like, "This is incredible. This sounds like it could be the soundtrack to the next Mario Kart game." So the Rainbow Road thing, we got a point there, man. That was unsolicited.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the case of a jam this weekend that we said it multiple times already, but it went in a totally different direction early than we're accustomed to. In this case, it lived in that space and just kind of like milked it for everything they could. And it's one of those where I've listened back to it and you blink your eyes and you're almost at the end of the jam. And I feel like that's what happened to the band because it's so fun where 10 minutes are gone in a flash. And I feel like someone finally looked at the clock and was like, oh shit, it's set break. We got to wrap this thing up because it's just all of a sudden like, land the plane, got to get the set break.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it had a chance to be the GOAT Big Modern if it had just kept going. But I mean, when you're just putting this many big jams out into the universe, you're going to run into time constraints. But going into set 2, I know you love this cover a lot, so I'm going to let you take the lead here. Is this like the goated fish in the sea? I need a verdict on it.
That's tough because there's so many good versions, but this one's got a case. It's definitely the longest version by far we've ever gotten of Fish in the Sea. I know we've had some stellar ones like, with the horns from back in the day and all that. But this one's absolutely extraordinary in a totally different way. We always kind of start off fishing the sea with this like crunchy, fuzzy jam. But theme of the weekend with Goose, we're going to just pivot to a totally different level than we're normally used to. Peter starts hitting this kind of like buzzing, chirpy synth, and we pivot into a slower kind of marching feel with some hints of Middle Eastern style thrown in there. And then the arpeggiator starts going while Peter simultaneously dancing between the vintage vibe and the traditional keys to add this kind of like Latin flavor to the jam. And that might be like the biggest earworm jam of the entire weekend because like that's lived in my head, this part of the Fish in the Sea jam, because it's very, very catchy. And Rick's kind of dancing around all of this with like some great work from his whammy pedal while letting the dynamics of the piano kind of dictate the jam for a while before taking over at the perfect moment to close out the Fish in the Sea with like this epic samba sounding influenced outro. And if you're watching the feed, these like red and blue lights are flashing. We actually posted a clip of it on our socials because it was like that good. And it just feels like an iconic moment when it comes to the covers of Goose all time, because I don't know that we'll ever see a better version of this that doesn't have like a guest on it or something, in my opinion, Mike.
Okay, thank you for that. Because for me, this is the best Fish in the Sea. It's not even close. The looping, Trevor's super low end, around the 13-minute mark. It sounds like it's haunted carnival music, and I love like that Latin flair treatment from Rick. Like you said, near the end, it sounds like every sound in the world is somehow happening all at once. Is just maybe the most fun of the weekend. I think is a good call. And going right up here, no taking your foot off the gas because this SOS Dawn is absolutely bonkers as well. It may be the greatest Dawn anyone's ever heard. I mean, they really let this one peak more than I could have ever expected. And there was just so much passion and joy in the playing here. Just really electric version, I feel like, of this.
We finally got a jammed out version of Dawn, SOS Dawn here, man, because you talked about it a little bit with Animal. I don't feel that way when I hear it, but it's one of those things when we're recapping this many shows, like you got to prioritize what you're focusing on and what you listen back to. And SOS and Dawn have kind of been in this mode when they're together where it's like they're almost always the same length. Maybe the jam's a little different out of Dawn, but you like kind of know what to expect. So want to focus more on the other improv you heard through the night or something like that. Not the case here, because about 10 and a half minutes in, when you're expecting to take that ride out of Dawn into like that ascendant finish, Rick takes his playing way down to the softer feel, and Peter's playing this riff on the keys that sounds a little bit like Welcome to Delta to me, actually, to serve as a transition to probably the most surprising place we saw a jam inserted all weekend, just because we're not used to it with SOS and Dawn. But then, from there, Rick starts playing this really like percussive, funkier style guitar, leaning on some like sliding triads to set the groove, which you don't always hear that from Rick, especially not somewhere like SOS. And it's accompanying this like ridiculously funky groove Trevor's laying down. And Rick does as he does, because he continues to blow our minds, kind of finding the perfect place while living in this groove to just insert some melody and take us out into where we need to go. But I really enjoyed the full band groove on this. We got about like 8 minutes more of music than we'd expect to out of SOS and Dawn, and I'm here for it. I'd love to see way more of this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I only wrote a couple sentences about this, but it's funny you brought it up. I heard a little bit of Delta. I definitely heard that as well. But it was just so clear they were having so much fun playing it and they just didn't want the jam to end. And the crowd fed off of that because I think, once we started to get further into it, everyone kind of realized, okay, this is a special SOS Dawn, and we all just kind of rode the wave with them. So that was super fun. And then a really good placement for Bourne, super needed cooldown because we've just been burning nothing but gas at this point. Very short Bourne as well, but kind of a perfect palate cleanser and also great. Like if that was like a song that you just wanted to hear that night, you got the song and then they went right into an absolutely ridiculous hunger site.
Yeah, I think I'm allergic to Bourne jams because I've gotten two now, and they're both
I know,
short.
I feel bad.
No, but I'm always happy to hear it because it's such a terrific song, and you nailed it. Absolutely great palate cleanser. And real quick, I want to shout out that they kicked off the Driptych here, the Born Hunger Site Drip Field back to back to back, similar to the start of the studio album Drip Field. And yeah, it's just absolutely terrific stuff. Really quick shout out also to our friend of the pod, Bruce. His son Jackson is obsessed with the Driptych, always asking his dad for the studio cuts back to back to back like this. So hope you enjoyed listening to this with your dad, man. I know you're 3, but you got to get to a show, dude.
Oh, good shit. Well, I'm going to say a little bit about this hunger site because at this point in the show, I'm like literally just over the moon because, somehow we're going to squeeze another banger in here. This one goes for like a way more experimental style in its first section than we've been seeing out of Hunger Site. I don't want to use the same reference, but a little bit of the Westville Rockdale in it, just more discordant, tones in a weird, creepy ambient space. And then later on, you get like almost like Boo's Castle from Mario Kart vibes, throwing in, another Mario video game reference, but that's what it felt like. And the peak on this thing was just super massive. Super happy to see Hunger Site take a left turn. As we've been saying it ad nauseum, I'm getting sick of saying it, but just lots of new styles here.
We're now a Mario Kart podcast. Just FYI, we're gonna switch all of our marketing to be Mario Kart branded now.
There you go.
You said it, man. This jam is excellent and similar to the vein of the EMG. It's like constant darkness and constant tension with no release. Like you're expecting to like go back into your happy place with Hunger Site, and it just never happens. Like super darkly tinged, and some really interesting stuff going on early on with it, with like the reverse effect that Rick does with his looper sometimes, and all the different dynamics between all of the members of the band, with like a dark bass line from Trev, some kind of like optimistic but haunting keys from Peter. Rick's adding that unsettling feeling with all those reverse notes and everything that sounds almost like strings, like orchestral in a way, maybe like Hell's Orchestra, I don't know, but really, really cool. And then when the pace picks up, to my ear, it sounded a little bit like we got Flamingo's reference from Goose. It sounded a little bit like that groove to me. And I looked over at Sarah. I was like, I think this is Flamingo's, but I'll leave that to the experts to decide. I'm just going to believe that in my head. But out of nowhere, some more tickles of the keys, some spooky keys from Pete, and the jam contorts to like the evil second cousin of the Madhuvan from night 2. So really dark, gritty space for the rest of the jam, and just like really unsettling in the best kind of way. I am here for some Dark Goose, and I really hope this continues. It's not just like a one-off. Like maybe they think that Milwaukee's haunted or something.
It's funny, at the beginning of this, I was talking about how many great Bliss jams there are for Bliss fans. And as we've been going through this together, it's kind of worked out that like the first night and a half or so, you got a lot of heavy, great Bliss jams. And then the back night and a half, you've got some of these great standout dark jams. So really something for everyone here, and great examples from both sides of the equation. And we're ending here with Dripfield, which another highlight, just stretching this mammoth set list out even more. At this point, do they even care about time? Loved how quickly they got away from the song proper here. You don't often hear them venturing from the Dripfield mode so quickly, but I think they knew they were up against it with the time constraints, and so they just got off in a hurry, and they built into this nice blues rock feel with a massive finish. And getting tired of saying it, but cool new area for Dripfield.
Yeah, a short jam, like you said, but packed a punch for totally different reasons than the Hunger Site. One of those compact jams that you could totally see if you sit with it long enough, you could convince yourself that it deserves to be, a jam of the year type of candidate. I wish it was a little bit longer, because it's really cool to see Dripfield go into such like a boppy, dancier space. Like it was like a good feels Dripfield, which you're not always accustomed to seeing when we get more like those like tribal feeling jams that go into like atmospheric bliss. This was not that. We wound up going from like dance funk into straight 80s hair metal zone to end this thing. And by the end of it, you're looking around like, where's the roof? Where's the doors? They're still here. How is that possible? Just an insane ending to the second set before going to the encore.
Yeah, there were a lot of little sprinkles of metal in this run. It's great. And we go to the encore where we end with probably the most appropriate song to end the first run of the year, given that Give It Time is the lead single of the new album and coming out here in just a couple months. But we end with Give It Time. And I'm not going to say too much other than it's a beautiful song. And when I thought about it leaving the show, I think it is absolutely the best choice to end the run on. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but for me, it was they nailed that.
No, I mean the whole weekend I was wondering when it was going to rear its head, and then they played it in this encore, and like you said, I think it was the best possible place to play it. Like it had to happen here, and it's interesting looking back at these encores real quick. Is this just kind of going off the cuff here? That they were so focused on jamming during the main sets all 3 nights that they capped off the encores of all 3 shows with a short song like this. But I think Give It Time lands the best of the 3. And how could you not play it after just releasing it as your single and as an omen to it being played in the Super Bowl the day after? So pretty cool.
Yeah, just a special moment. The whole theater definitely felt the emotion of the moment too, and I think we all know what a monumental year 2025 is going to be for this band. So just super excited. Right note to end on. Any final thoughts on this run overall? Takeaways from the weekend?
I think we've covered quite a bit, but I think that the jamming is in such a great place with this band. They are clearly continuing to level up, all of them. Really missed Jeff this weekend, but we saw that, even when they're hurting as a band, they can pick up the pieces and continue to give us the best possible version of music they possibly can any given night. And I just think that 2025 is going to be an incredible year for them, and I really hope that everyone stays healthy and in a good mental health space. And I really hope that Jeff's doing okay out there. I was thinking it all weekend, and I really hope he comes back soon.
Well said, brother. Very excited for 2025. Definitely send all of my best to Jeff from us and hope he's back out there soon. But what a beautiful start to the year. Very exciting place that Goose is in. And I'm sure this year is just going to continue to amaze us both. So ready for everything that is to come. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Stay tuned. We'll be dropping an episode next week to recap Toronto through Grand Rapids and finish off this winter run. As always, be sure to check us out on all our socials at Slow Ready Pod. And just thank you so much for the support.
Thank you, everyone. We had so much fun with you in Milwaukee. We're continuing to have our minds blown watching these Toronto shows this week, and we're really excited to recap the rest of this winter run.
See ya.